you because I really want to get into the Word. I wanted to do that when I came up here. We are in Revelation. We're going to be in chapter 14. Be it the Father's will. We're going to actually finish chapter 14 today. Just a little recap to kind of bring us up to what's going on. In Revelation 14, verse 7, there's an angel. And the angel basically comes preaching the gospel, and it's, what does this angel say? Fear Yah. Fear the Father. And we talked about that last time. And then in 14:8, there's another angel, and he says, Babylon is fallen. Right? And so this is an angel announcing that. And then another angel comes, so in 3 verses, 7, 8, 9, in verse 9, another angel shows up, and it basically, this angel says, hey, if anybody takes this mark of the beast, you're in a lot of trouble, right? And so that's what that angel puts out. And then I think an important part that we've already covered is verse 12, and I'm going to actually read it. Here's the patient of the saints, of the set-apart ones. Here are they that keep the commandments of Elohim and the faith of Yeshua. So you keep the commandments and you have the faith of Yeshua. We talked about that a lot last week. So that kind of brings us up to today. And today's sermon is called The Harvest. Harvest is normally a good thing, right? You think of the harvest and all the bounty. We're going to see. All right, we're going to start in verse 14. And I looked, and behold, a white cloud. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to read from 14 to the end, and then we'll come back. I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and upon the cloud one sat like unto the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud, Thrust in thy sickle and reap, for the time is come for thee to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. And he that sat on the cloud thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. And another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar which had the power over fire. And he cried with a loud voice to him that had the sharp sickle, saying, Thrust in thy sharp sickle, and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. And the angel thrust in his sickle into the earth, and gathered the vine of the earth, and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of Elohim. And the winepress was trodden without the city, and blood came out of the winepress, even unto the horse bridles, by the space of 1,600 furlongs. That's what we're going to look at today. So when we go back to verse 14, and it says, Look, I behold a white cloud, and upon the cloud sat one like unto the Son of Man. Who's that?
Yeshua.
That's Yeshua, right? So he's looking up and he's seeing Yeshua coming. And then it says, he has on his head a golden crown. Now this is kind of important because when you read this in the English and you think, okay, this Yeshua is coming with a crown, this is not a crown like a king. We have no king but Yeshua, right?
Right.
This is not a king's crown that he's wearing. It's not a symbol of royalty. Matter of fact, I looked it up. The Greek word is Stephanos. And a Stephanos for crown here is actually like a wreath or a garland. Picture, the Caesars in the pictures, and they'd have that little thing on their head. They would also award that to like the winners of a race or a competition or the Olympics or something. Instead of getting a gold medal, they'd get this cool little wreath that they could wear on their head. That's what that is. They would also give this symbol to like generals. If a general goes off and leads a big battle and comes back victorious for Rome or something like that, they would give him this wreath, this golden wreath, if he was really good at it, and other forms for others. And so this Stephanos, this crown, this really wreath or garland, is awarded to winners. It's awarded to people who are victorious. It's not a crown of royalty that we see Yeshua with here. It's a crown of victory. That's what he's wearing, and that's what it symbolizes. And because it's gold, a gold crown of victory, it's like the highest victory. That's what is symbolized here. I thought that was kind of interesting. It's not like, a little king crown like you see in the movies. Compare this crown that we see Yeshua coming at this time in the future. I don't think that necessarily that far into the future from now. Compare this crown that he's wearing to the crown of thorns that he was wearing when he was put on the stake and killed for us. See, that was a crown of shame, is what that was. It's like, haha, you think you're the king of the Jews? Here, wear this thing. And it made his head bleed and all that stuff. That was done to mock him. That's why the Roman soldiers did that. So taking that kind of thought, who was behind I love this word, ignominious. I rarely use that word. Who was behind the ignominious death of Yeshua on the stake? Who was behind it?
The Pharisees and the Sadducees.
Right? That's the first answer. Who was behind them?
Satan. All of us.
Satan. Right? It was Satan's plan. Satan's been trying the whole time from the very beginning, and I could go into a whole sermon on that, where Satan was trying to thwart the will of Yah all the way down through. All of it also focused on Yeshua. Even back in the garden, that was focused on Yeshua all the way back then. He's been trying to thwart him the whole time, and that's who was behind it. And so Satan was ultimately behind the crown of thorns that was placed on Yeshua's head in mockery of him, our Savior. And now compare and contrast that with here he comes back with the crown of victory placed on his head by Yah. Is basically what that is, what that symbolization is. I think that's kind of cool. All right, verse 15. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him in that cloud. I'm going to read one more. Oh, well, I'm going to continue. Thrust in thy sickle and reap, for the time is come for thee to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. You know, there's a lot of Christian pastors, and I'm talking about going back to the 17 and 1800s, who have a huge problem with this verse. There are people in our faith. I have a version called the Aramaic New Testament, and so whenever we're covering Scripture, I read about 8 different versions of it in all these different Bibles that I have, and I kind of compare and contrast them. And the Aramaics, their version of the Bible, they just remove that whole part out entirely. They have a problem with this bit of Scripture. What do you think the problem is with verse 15? Anybody know? This voice here in the military, we call this a command. This is Yeshua sitting on the cloud with the crown of victory on his head. And it says in verse 15, another angel came out of the temple crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud. So this angel, this messenger of Yah, is telling Yeshua to do something. Take out your sickle and thrust it in there. Do these things. And people had a huge problem with that. They're like, you can't be telling Yeshua what to do. Well, I think the people who had the problem with it, mostly because I just used the word because it's in our vernacular as believers that we are, I said messenger. Most people don't, that doesn't translate in their head. The people going to church tomorrow, most of them, when they read angel, they think angel. And truth be told, they think of some white robe thing with big wings, right? Hopefully male, because all angels are male. But an angel is a messenger from Yah. So this is like a direct message, if you will, from Yah to Yeshua to do this thing in your position as judge, which we're going to see he is, or commander, or whatever. And so that's why that's there. And then it says, this is an interesting word here too, verse 15. Thrust thy sickle and reap, for the time is come for thee to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. Well, when we think of ripe, and we already read all the way through here, and we read about how the grapes are, that's why I said, are we going to sing the battle hymn of the Republic? Because this is the bit of scripture that the battle hymn of the Republic comes from. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. Dun, dun, dun. That comes from this. When we think of ripe, and we read about clusters, so we're thinking grapes, right? When you think of a ripe grape, you think of a pretty plump, juicy, perfect to eat grape to eat, right? But that's not what this word is. This word ripe, as it's used here, I don't speak Greek, but I can look it up, is zeraino. Zeraino is ripe. And what it means is way beyond ripe. Has anybody ever seen what happens when you leave grapes on a vine? You don't pick them? They turn into raisins, right? And they actually do. And so do other berries and other fruit that doesn't fall off the tree, but most apples and pears and stuff fall off a tree. But berries, like grapes, turn into raisins. And what this word means is well beyond ripe. They're dried up, they're desiccated, they're just nothing right there. That's this word ripe. It's past time to reap the harvest, is really what this is connoting, is saying right here. It's past time to reap. This has gone on long enough. You know, people say, I've said it myself, I didn't make it up though, if Yah doesn't judge America, he's going to have to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah. Now that's a little bit irreverent saying what God has to do. But the point being, this world is getting so wicked. This country is getting so wicked. The world is getting so wicked. It's getting past time for him to come reap. And so here we're reading, he's going to, and in fact it says here in 15, thrust thy sickle and reap, for the time has come for thee to reap, for the harvest of the earth is past time. It's past time to reap. That's basically what that says right there. So, 16. He that sat on the cloud, that's Yeshua, thrust in his sickle of the earth, and the earth was reaped. The imagery in here that we're reading, we're about to read about a sharp sickle in the next verse. Thrust in the sharp sickle thrust in. It doesn't sound nice, right? It's like, it's violent. These are words of violence. But that's exactly what's happening. And so he thrust in and he reaped. Verse 17. And another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. So here's Yeshua reaping the earth that is past time to be reaped, to be gathered, to be cut off. It reminds me of when you have a tree that doesn't bear good fruit. What are we supposed to do with that tree? Cut off the branches, and then what do we do with those branches? We burn them, right? Again, that's kind of violent imagery, if you think about it. It's true agricultural imagery. That's what they do. We have to make room for the good fruit. But that's what happens. Well, here, Yeshua is reaping these past due fruit to be reaped, and he needs help. So the Father sends another angel with a sharp sickle. That tells you how much wickedness is going on in the world. Now, does Yeshua need help? No, he doesn't. But it's the point of it. There is so much work to be done here that and we're going to get to that towards the end too. Matter of fact, we're going to get to that right now. Remember the phrase? The verse, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few, right? Let's go to Matthew chapter 9. Here's Yeshua reaping, and then another angel shows up. An angel is a messenger. Therefore, a messenger doesn't just show up, a messenger is sent, right? And he shows up with a sharp sickle to help. And then that just brought to mind to me, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Let's look at Matthew 9:35. And Yeshua went about all the cities and the villages, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the gospel of the kingdom, the good news of the kingdom, and healing every sickness and every disease among his people. So here's just right there in that verse. We're going to do a little mini sermon on that verse right there because I was looking at that. Yeshua went about all the cities and villages. So he's traveling. Anybody here ever had a job where you travel for work? It sounds fun and glamorous at first. It's like, oh, you get to go here, or you get to drive there, or you get to fly there, or whatever. And I'll admit, the first 2 or 3 times it's kind of cool. And then it's like, you know what? I just want to be at home. This is like no fun at all. It's exhausting to travel. And Yeshua's not flying. Sometimes he does go by a little boat, but mostly it's walking. Right? And so this is exhausting. So he's doing that. Let me find where I was. And it says he's teaching in their synagogues. Anybody here ever taught classes? I've taught lots of classes. It's part of what I do. I do it now. I did it before. I did it for 30 years. It takes a lot out of you to teach. That's another thing where you sit there and you look at somebody who's teaching, and it's like, oh yeah, that's easy. I could stand up there, and any fool could stand up on that box and talk. It takes a lot out of you to teach. Sister Kate will tell you, after Shabbat's over and everybody leaves, I'm kind of like wiped out for a while. And so, again, we're looking at, it's just this little sentence about what Yeshua did, but you start realizing, oh, this is kind of hard. And then it says he's preaching. He's preaching the gospel of the kingdom. When you're preaching the gospel, and that's not just limited to Pastor Joe or Yeshua or whatever, and I'm not trying to do that comparison. We're all supposed to go forth and preach, right, to who we have contact with. There's a lot on your shoulders when you do that. And you have to recall things correctly, and you have to put it in the words that the person's going to understand. And again, it can be a little bit exhausting, a little bit tiring. It's certainly not, hoo-hoo, I feel great, I got to preach today. I think most people, when they're done doing a full day of preaching, it's like, yeah, I could kick my feet up a little bit and rest. And so that's going on. He's teaching, he's preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and he's healing every sickness and every disease among the people. So not only all of that, he's going and he's dealing with sick people, and he's, doing all those things. And so this is the whole point of this verse is, this is a lot of work that Yeshua is doing, right? He's doing it for us. He's doing it for the people. So let's keep going. 36. But when he saw the multitudes, so he's doing this, and then he just sees all these people, because the word spreads, and so people start showing up. He was moved with compassion on them, because they fainted. Actually, that means they were scattered, and they're harassed and scattered abroad, as sheep having no shepherd. So here's all these poor people who aren't hearing the word. They don't have somebody taking care of them. They don't have somebody healing. No one is certainly traveling to them. And so he's moved to compassion, and then he said unto his disciples, who were there with him. It doesn't say the disciples were doing this stuff, though. You notice that? Mm-hmm. It's like, here's Yeshua. Oh, he's traveling with his disciples, but it says Yeshua's doing this, and Yeshua's doing this, and Yeshua's doing this. And so he turns to his disciples, and he says, the harvest truly is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore that Yahweh of the harvest, that he send forth laborers into his harvest. So see, here's Yeshua once again, because we just read in Revelation, he's reaping the harvest, he's bringing in the harvest, and he gets help because he needed it. Here, allow me that. Here he's saying, hey, look at all this work. The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Pray to the Father that he sends more workers. And I could go off on the disciples right now. But you guys should read that later and think about, why is he saying there's few workers when he's surrounded by 12 guys who are supposed to be helping him, right? But there's that in there too. But the point is, he's talking about a different kind of harvest there, though, isn't he? Mm-hmm. This is a harvest of the needy, of those who need Yeshua. They need the good news. They need healing. They need preaching. They need teaching in Torah. And what's going on. And so that's the harvest that he's talking about. We're going to harvest these people for Yah. This harvest, you can flip back to Revelation now, this harvest that we're reading in Revelation is entirely different. And so the Revelation harvest is different from the harvest that we read about in Matthew, and we're going to cover a different harvest again later. Different but the same. But for now, let's go back to Revelation chapter 14, and we are in verse 17. Another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, also having a sharp sickle. I think it's interesting that it says Yeshua had a sickle, and this angel has a sharp sickle. I just found that interesting. 18. And another angel came from the altar which had power. Now in King James it says power over fire. Does somebody have power over the fire in their Bible?
The fire.
It's the fire. It's the fire of the altar. So there's a messenger, there's an angel whose job it is primarily to take care of the fire in the altar. This angel shows up, and he cries with a loud voice to him that had the sharp sickle. So who's he talking to, Yeshua or the angel?
The angel.
He's talking to the angel, right? The second angel. He says to him, thrust in thy sharp sickle and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. So, there's a couple things here. Number one, this fully ripe is different. It's a different ripe. It's a different word in the Greek. It says ripe in English, but the first ripe was dried up like on the vine. It's past time. This ripe means what you think it means. Juicy, ripe. It's totally ready. It was used by secular authors, people who just wrote regular things, poems and whatever, to describe like the fullness of youth and, a beautiful life, and they're ripe. And it's just like, so this ripe means what we think it means. But when it says here, hold on, let me look at this. He cries to the first angel, and why doesn't he just say to in verse 17, another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, also having a sharp sickle. All right, so he shows up to help Yeshua reap, right? In verse 17, the one with the sharp sickle. Why doesn't he just commence to reaping? Because he shows up with a sharp sickle, this angel, and then another angel comes and says, okay, now go ahead and reap. Isn't that interesting?
Messages are coming fast.
They're coming fast, but here's what I'm thinking. Timing is everything. And in military operations, and I think military because of my background, but in any operations, construction, timing is important. In the military, you get all your pieces in place, and then you attack. We don't attack earlier. We don't have our force to bear. It's the same thing with, we're going to go clear site out here to put a new building in for Shofar Mountain. Well, we don't just show up with the 2x4s and hammers and nails before we get the bulldozer in here to clear. Right? So the bulldozers show up, and maybe somebody's got to deliver the bulldozer, and somebody else is going to drive the bulldozer. So we get the bulldozer delivered, and then the driver shows up, and it's like, okay, go ahead and bulldoze. That's what's going on. It's Yah's timing. So he's getting, this is a big harvest that's going on. This is a big operation of reaping. The world is getting reaped, as we're going to see. And so I believe that the second angel, the first angel that shows up after Yeshua with the sharp sickle, he's just being put in place. And then once he's in place and other things are ready to go, then another angel comes and tells that angel, commence reaping. Execute, execute, execute. Go. And that's what happens. It says the clusters of the vine. Let me see here. Sharp sickle saying, thrust in thy sharp sickle and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth. You're gathering the clusters. These are grapes. Analogy, imagery. Clusters of the vine. Okay, well, clusters grow on a vine. What vine? The vine of the earth. Who's the prince of this earth?
Satan.
Those are his clusters. That's his vine. And they're about to get reaped. That's what all this imagery is right here. Verse 19, and the angel thrust, that's another word, his sickle into the earth and gathered the vine of the earth and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of Elohim. So this winepress is of the wrath of God, is what this is. And again, it reminds me of the fruit branches that we harvest or we cut off and then we cast them into the fire, right? That's what's happening to these. These grapes, if you will, are being harvested. These seed of Satan, the spawn of him, all this evilness that's going on in the world, and they're being cast into the winepress of the wrath of God. Verse 20, and the winepress was trodden without the city. What city do you think we're talking about?
Jerusalem.
It is Jerusalem. And the blood came out of the winepress, even unto the horse bridles, by the space of 1,600 furlongs. That's about 184 miles. I looked that up. Now, how many people had heard this part before about the blood coming up to the bridles of the horses? I had. I heard it at a very impressionable age. And a horse bridle is about this high. And so I thought then that the blood is like a pool of blood, like that's pretty high. That's almost the deep end, middle end of the pool of blood that goes out for 184 miles. Well, think about that for a second. It doesn't make sense. At the end of 184 miles, if it's bridle high pool of blood, is there an invisible wall out there? America. Is there an invisible wall out there holding this pool in? No, that's not what it is. There's not a pool of blood up to the bridles of the horses. The horses are stamping, right? And they're fighting, and these grapes are exploding, if you will, and the blood is coming up. It's splashing up as high as the bridles of the horses out to, let's just call it 200 miles, 184 miles. Now think about this. This is symbolizing a huge, horrible battle that's taking place, and it's carnage and blood like hasn't been seen since medieval times. You know, in modern, well, maybe World War I had some. But, you know, even World War I, I don't think the battles were as bloody necessarily as they were in medieval times. I mean, they were just horrific. This is going to be a horrific battle. Now, when this was written around AD 90-ish, it was incomprehensible to have a battlefield that spread over that distance. And it says, if you look at the way it's written, unto the horses' bridles by the space. That means as far as 184 miles. Well, that's a radius. That's 184, and it's Jerusalem, by the way. That's the city. So from Jerusalem, 184 miles, and I found a thing online where I could play with it, and I'd like put a circle around Jerusalem. I could only do it to 175 miles. But that covers like most of Jordan and Syria, and Saudi Arabia goes into, you know, parts of Egypt and stuff. That's a huge battlefield. That's an incomprehensible battlefield when this was written in AD 90. It's not incomprehensible anymore. We can fight battles over time and space now over big, large areas. If you think about when we went into Iraq the first time, the 100-hour war, that battlefield went from Kuwait to Baghdad. That was one battlefield that just kind of happened like that. This is coming to pass. We're going to see this, and it's going to be a huge, bloody, terrible affair, and what that's demonstrating is a lot of people are going to die. So this is the harvest of Yah, and he's harvesting the evil, if you will, the evil grapes, if you want to use that analogy. We read about Yeshua talking about the harvest. The harvest is plenteous, but the workers are few. That was a harvest of Yah's people, right? He's trying to bring people into the fold. There's another harvest. Let's go to Matthew chapter 13. I said it's the same but different. Matthew 13, we're going to start in verse 24. Matthew 13:24, Yeshua is speaking another parable he put forth unto them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field. But while the man slept, his enemy came, and he sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. Now again, really quickly, wheat, everybody knows what wheat is. And wheat used to grow high. Wheat doesn't grow high anymore. They've modified it. What's that, GMO or whatever? They've modified it so it grows short. But it used to grow high, and you eat it when it's ripe. Tares looks like wheat when it's growing up. You can't tell the difference between what's growing that looks like grass and it's growing up. You can't tell what's tares and what's wheat. But when they come up, the wheat, which one bows?
The wheat.
When the wheat is ripe, it gets heavy and it bends over. But the tares, they don't bend over. There's another whole teaching there about the wheats and the tares. But they grow little seed heads too, but you can't eat them. And if you gathered them all together, wheats and tares together, and mixed it up in your grain bin, you couldn't eat it. Right? So it's a problem when you have tares in your field. And so this guy goes out there and he dutifully plants wheat, and everybody here who plants gardens knows you put a lot of time and effort into it, and then some yahoo comes in and, you know, plants this other stuff that's basically going to ruin your whole crop. That's what's going on there. While he slept, the enemy did that. Verse 26, but when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared tares also with the wheat. And so the servants of the householder came, and they said to him, Sir, does not thou sow good seed in thy field? Didn't you plant good wheat in your field? You went down and you bought the good stuff. You know, what's going on? From whence has it tares? Why is there tares in our wheat field? And he said unto them, an enemy has done this. And the servant said unto him, do you want us to go gather up the tares? And he said, no, lest while you gather up the tares, you root up also the wheat with them. Let both of them grow together until the harvest. And in the time of harvest, I will say to the reapers, here we're into reaping and harvesting, gather ye together first the tares, and bind them into bundles and burn them, but after, then gather the wheat into my barn. Let's skip forward. That's the parable. He spoke in parables so everybody didn't understand, right? He did that on purpose. But now we're going to get an explanation. Verse 36. And when Yeshua had sent the multitude away, he went into the house, and his disciples came to him, saying, declare unto us the parable of the tares of the field, because they didn't understand. And he answered and he said unto them, now this is really important to understand the wheats and the tares. He that sows the good seed is the Son of Man. So who is the Son of Man? Yeshua. The field is the world. Okay, so Yeshua is putting good seed in the world. The good seed are the children of the kingdom. Okay, that's us. We got that. But the tares are the children of the wicked one. Man, I could go long just there. We could go all the way back to Genesis chapter 2, right there. But we're not going to today. The enemy that sowed them is the devil. I will just say this. The good seed is how does it say, is the children of the kingdom? Are those real people? Those are real people. It says the bad seed is the children of the wicked one. Are those real people? Those are real people. And the harvest, the enemy that sowed them, the bad seed, is the devil, Satan. And the harvest is the end of the world. And the Revelation. It's the end of the world, and the reapers are the angels. And Yeshua's also in there with the sickle. The Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all the things that offend, and them which do iniquity. What's iniquity? Lawlessness, Torahlessness. If you're not keeping Torah, you're getting gathered out of the kingdom with the reapers that are gathering these clusters, and the blood that's going to get stomped and it's going to come up to the bridles of the horses and go out. Them who do iniquity. And shall cast them into a furnace of fire, and there shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. And then shall righteous shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Who has ears to hear, let him hear. Everybody here's heard of the rapture, right? Everybody here's heard of pre-tribulation rapture? It's like all this stuff we're reading about in Revelation, and the blood coming up to the bridles of the horses, and the reapers reaping and sowing, and disease and plague. We're believers, so we don't have to partake in that because we get a fast ticket out of here via the rapture. That's kind of what they say, right? Well, we just read, who gets gathered first? The tares get gathered first. And then once the evil is removed, then righteousness of the sun shines forth. So the tares are getting reaped first. So you don't want to pray, I know y'all don't, you guys don't want to pray for an early reaping. Oh, I just want him to take me out of here first. Well, then you're going to get cast into the winepress of Yah's wrath, if you do, or into the fire of wailing and gnashing of teeth. You just don't want that. And so that's the other reaping story, but it ties in with this one. All right, let's go back here. Revelation. In Revelation, oh, look at that. That's a hornet. It's February. Get thee behind me, Satan. All right, he's trying to distract me. We're in chapter 14, but in don't worry, it won't mess with you. Chapter 13, it's a bad, scary chapter. It's the kind of chapter that makes people who aren't that steeped in the Word say, I want him to take me out of here first. Because no one wants to go through this. We've got it in chapter 7 of verse 13, war with the saints, the beast system, and the Antichrist and all that. There's a war with the saints. In verse 12, the whole earth worships the beast. Verse 15, if they don't worship the beast, they're killed. And then everybody has to take the mark. It says everybody takes the mark or they can't buy, trade, and sell, right? That's a horrible just thing going on in chapter 13. And then we go to chapter 14, which is what we've been reading about. And this, if you will, chapter 14 is an answer to chapter 13. It's Yah's answer to chapter 13. Oh, you think that Satan's all that, some people, and you take his mark and you worship him and all the world does? I got something for you. Just about the time they think they've got the whole world under their control and are doing what, hey, we're doing it the way we want, here comes the angelic reapers, if you will. And they're getting put into the winepress of his wrath. And so the good news is, yeah, it may be difficult times for the saints to go through tribulation. No one's saying it's going to be sweetness and light. It's why we do a lot of the other things we do, quite frankly. But in the end, we win because Yah wins and we're following Yah. That's all we have to know. The race has already been run. The race has already been won. We're just going to go through with it and do it. And so we can take that and hang on to that. When those reapers come, they're reaping them, not us. They're going to take them out of here so that all we have is loveliness and Yeshua as our king and everything's righteous and there's no more of this nonsense going on in the world anymore to dampen down the light. If he be with us, who can stand against us? Nobody. Let's pray.